name's Mark, and like Nathan said, my project this summer was a high-throughput screen for antibiotic compounds to target sulfate-reducing microorganisms. Now, in order for any of my project to make any sense, I first have to explain to you the process of oil extraction. Here's a schematic of an oil reservoir. In order to access the oil that's underground, you first have to drill a pipeline into the earth. Now, at first, the oil recovery process is easy because of all the built-up pressure that's underground. During the early stages, the oil is said to gush out of the earth, as pictured. Now, gushing accounts for about 40% of the potential oil recovery. But as the pressures normalize, the gushing stops, and you need to inject water into the ground to repressurize the system and recover the remaining 60% of oil. Now, because you need about 4 barrels of water to generate 1 barrel of oil, and because these reservoirs are absolutely massive, this means you'll need about 20 million liters of water to treat just a single reservoir. Combine that with the fact that there are over 15,000 reservoirs in Texas alone, and what this ultimately means is that the process of oil extraction consumes about 25 billion liters of water in the state of Texas alone in just a single month. So as such, the only feasible water source to use is seawater. Now, one of the downsides to using seawater is that it contains sulfate-reducing microorganisms, which is an umbrella term for a diverse group of microbes which, through their metabolism, convert sulfate to hydrogen sulfide. Now, sulfate reducers are bad because hydrogen sulfide is really bad. A few of the things hydrogen sulfide does is it goes on to cause pipeline corrosion and eventually explosion. This here is a picture of a gas pipeline that's been exposed to sulfate reducers for only 4 years. And the pipeline explosion that occurred in South Bay in San Bruno in 2010 was ultimately attributed to the activity of sulfate reducers. Additionally, hydrogen sulfide is a very potent neurotoxin, and it poses a serious health risk to reservoir workers. In the late 1990s alone, there were over 50 deaths that resulted from hydrogen sulfide inhalation on oil reservoirs. So as you can imagine, there's been a lot of research aimed at how we can kill sulfate reducers to inhibit this process, which is called biosouring. But by far the most effective treatment is called nitrate injection. Now, nitrate injection is effective because it targets sulfate reducers on a number of mechanisms. And one of these is that it stimulates the growth of nitrate-reducing bacteria, who convert nitrate to nitrite through their metabolism. Nitrite is a very potent inhibitor of sulfate reducers. So in other words, nitrate injection attempts to create a thriving community of nitrate reducers at the expense of sulfate reducers. Another benefit to nitrate injection is that it's seen as a green treatment. Nitrate and nitrate reducers are already present in seawater, so only minimal amounts of wastewater treatment are required before this treated water can be sent back into the ocean. There are a handful of downsides to nitrate treatment though. The first being that because nitrate and nitrate reducers are indigenous to seawater, sulfate reducers have had time to evolve and adapt to their presence. For instance, a lot of sulfate reducers have evolved detoxification enzymes that help them cope with this type of nitrite stress. Additionally, nitrate is not a very potent inhibitor. It's typical for a single reservoir to require as much as 94,000 pounds of sodium nitrate to be fully treated, which obviously from a transportational and operational standpoint is a complete nightmare. So our project this summer was, instead of looking at a few compounds that could potentially be an improvement to nitrate injection, we wanted to look at every single compound that would be an improvement. We collaborated with the Small Molecule Discovery Center in UCSF, who have access to a drug library of over 150,000 compounds that are all FDA approved. We searched through everything from anti-cancer agents to Splenda. So this summer, we've tested over 12,000 compounds for inhibitory activity against sulfate reducers. And this picture up here right now is of one of the robots that we use to automate a lot of the liquid handling processes that make the screen on a magnitude this large even possible. So let me show you a bit of what it can do here. So what's going on right now is the robot is going to pick up 320 compounds from the UCSF drug library. It's going to pick up 64 positive and negative controls that we supply. Thank you. And these plates are complementary to one another. So what it's doing is it's superimposing those two plates to create our third test plate here that we'll bring back to the lab to study. After we take these plates back to the lab, we study each compound individually for inhibitory activity against sulfate reducers. Each point on this graph represents a single compound, and its height relative to the y-axis indicates how effective it was at an inhibitor. The higher it is relative to the y-axis, the more effective it was as a compound. We can then do statistical analyses on the plate, such as finding the plate mean and standard deviation, to determine which ones were only the most extremely statistically significant. And then we go back into the database to determine their identity. The next thing we do is we want to further investigate and characterize these compounds on an individual basis. One of the first experiments we then do is a dose response to determine its potency. This is visualized by us in a value called the IC50, which is the concentration that it takes for a compound to kill half of the population. We found that the nitrate used in nitrate injection is not a very potent inhibitor, as indicated by its very, very large IC50 value. We can then look up its molecular weight and its price per kilogram to get a good estimate of how much it would cost to treat a single barrel of oil in the field. We'll do this for every single one of our hits. And as you can see, we've already found a number of compounds that will compete with nitrate injection from a fiscal standpoint. And keep in mind that today, a barrel of oil costs about $100, so these are all very affordable treatments. Now the bad news about the middle three, metronidazole, clemizole, allopurinol, is that they're very toxic to both humans and the environment. They themselves would pose a serious health risk to reservoir workers, and an insane amount of wastewater would have to be treated, resulting from their usage. What this means is that the price in the final column for the middle three is deceptively low because it doesn't take into account the amount of wastewater treatment that must be done after they're used. I do want to direct your attention toward Chemical X. We're actually in the process of patenting it right now, so I can't explicitly say its name because it would violate a lot of IP bureaucracy. But this is all real data. As you can see, it's very potent compared to sodium nitrate, as indicated by its much lower IC50 value. It's also very fiscally competitive. One of the best things about Chemical X is that it's very non-toxic, and actually you send it down your drain every single day. This means that not only does it not pose a threat to reservoir workers, but also that wastewater treatment resulting from its usage would be very minimal. So this price you see in the final column is a pretty good estimate of what it would cost to use in the field. Some of the next experiments we do is we look at a compound's ability to specifically target sulfate reducers. We want compounds to target sulfate reducers specifically because there are a lot of other microbes in the reservoir that are very beneficial. For instance, those nitrate reducers that I mentioned earlier, they help to combat the pipeline corrosion process, so we don't want to kill them. We also don't want to kill a whole bunch of anthropogenic injected microbes that create biosurfactants, polymers, gases, and those all help to improve the oil recovery process. So the ideal compound here would have very high potency with respect to sulfate reducers, as indicated by a low IC50 value. And it doesn't kill nitrate reducers effectively, as indicated by a high IC50 value. And as you can see, Chemical X has shown more promising results in this aspect as well. What this data is saying is that Chemical X is 400 times more potent against sulfate reducers than it is against nitrate reducers. So this is very promising moving forward. So in summary, this summer we developed an efficient and effective primary and secondary screening process that allows us to proceed as far into the 150,000 compound drug library as we please. Going forward, I have to personally characterize and investigate about 70 more hits that I didn't even mention today. paying particularly close attention to chemical X, which has shown very promising results thus far. We also need to develop more secondary screens to ensure that these compounds will work in the field, such as developing assays that would let us know if the compound itself is corrosive. So I'd really like to take this time to thank my PI and mentor, John Coates and Hans Carlson, respectively. I'd like to thank our collaborators at UCSF, in particular Stephen Chen, the automation specialist. I'd like to thank the entire Coates Lab back there. Thank you guys for omnipresent discourse about science, improving our project, sports, Breaking Bad. And finally, Nathan and Leah for just so many countless hours behind the scenes. This wouldn't have been possible without you guys. And of course, the Rose Hill Foundation that allow so many of us to research this summer sans fiscal concerns. So thank you all for coming.